to the greatness of this world his wrath freed the earth from Kshatriyas, and even the gods themselves would be proud of his accomplishments. Krishna smiled, pleased with Yudhishthira's words, and nodded in agreement. The two illustrious men then made their way towards the banks of the river Ayavatai, where Bhishma lay on his bed of a rose. As they approached, they saw the Kuru heroes surrounded by many ascetics, including Vesa himself. Bhishma's piercing gaze met Krishna, and Yudhishthira, as they drew near, his eyes seemed to hold a deep sadness, but also a hint of determination. Krishna's expression turned somber as he beheld Bhishma's condition. He knew that the old warrior was at the end of his journey. With joined hands, Krishna approached Bhishma and said, "O mighty armed Bhishma, at the perceptions still clear, doth the understanding remain unclouded?" Bhishma nodded weakly. But Krishna continued, "I know that thou art a hero beyond compare. Thy virtues surpass even the gods themselves. Thou hast lived a life of righteousness, and the ascetic power is unmatched." Vishwa's eyes sparkled with gratitude as he listened to Krishna's words. He raised his head slightly and with joined hands replied, "Salutations to thee, O divine Krishna. Thou art the origin and dissolution of all worlds. Thou art the creator and destroyer. I offer my respects to thee, O Hrishikesh." As Bhishma spoke, his eyes seemed to gaze beyond the mortal realm, beholding the divine form of Krishna. The old warrior's face lit up with a sense of wonder and awe as he beheld the celestial form of his beloved Lord. Krishna smiled, pleased with Vishwa's devotion, and said, "Since thy devotion to me is so great, I have displayed my celestial form to thee, O bull among men. May this sight bring thee peace and comfort in these final moments." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft twilight glow, Krishna and Bhishma sat together in silence, surrounded by the sacred river and the assembled ascetics. In that moment, time itself seemed to stand still as
in the presence of Lord Krishna. Bhishma, the mighty and wise warrior, spoke with reverence. "O master of all the worlds," he began, "I am filled with joy upon hearing your words fraught with morality and profit. But what words can I say in your presence when you have already covered every subject of speech?" Bhishma's eyes shone with a deep respect as he continued, "Whatever is done or should be done in either world proceeds from your intelligent self, O God. A person who is capable of speaking about the heavens before the chief of the gods can surely speak on morality and pleasure and profit in your presence. Sees." Bhishma spoke. His body began to weaken, his limbs trembling with pain from the arrow wounds he had sustained. His understanding was clouded, and his voice faltered as he continued, "My mind is agitated by the pain of these wounds, O slayer of man. My strength is abandoning me. My life breaths are hastening to leave me. I fear that even the master of speech, Vryaspati, would be overcome with hesitation in speaking before you." Krishna's gentle smile lit up the air as he replied, "The words spoken by you are worthy of one who is foremost among the Kuru's race. Bhishma, your energy and patience are renowned, and your understanding of every subject is unmatched." With a wave of his hand, Krishna granted Bhishma a boon. "Discomfort, stupefaction, burning pain, hunger, and thirst shall not overcome you, O son of Ganga. Your perceptions and memory shall remain unclouded, and your understanding shall never fail." As the Lord's words took effect, Bhishma's strength began to return, his mind clearing like a moon emerging from the clouds. His eyes shone with gratitude as he beheld Krishna, his heart filled with devotion. The same shifted as the great rishis, led by Vesa, adored Krishna with hymns from the Vedas. The celestial shower of flowers rained down upon them, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend towards the divine presence of Lord Krishna. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape, the rishis rose from their devotions with reverent salutations. They bid farewell to Krishna and Bhishma, promising to return the next day, and so, with hearts full of joy and devotion, they departed for their respective abodes. Krishna and the Pandavas, accompanied by their loyal friends, including Satyaki and Sanjaya, prepared to depart. They saluted Bhishma, circumambulating him in a gesture of respect before mounting their chariots. The air was filled with the sound of celestial instruments, as if the very gods themselves were celebrating the divine.
As the night wore on, Lord Krishna, the slayer of Madhu, lay in his bed, his senses at peace. But as the first light of dawn crept into the sky, he stirred, and with a gentle stretch sat up to begin his morning contemplation, fixing his gaze inward. He meditated on the eternal Brahma, seeking guidance for the day ahead us. He sat in stillness. The sounds of devotion began to fill the air. A group of skilled musicians and poets gathered outside his chambers, their sweet voices chanting hymns and pureness in praise of Vasudeva, the Lord of all creatures and creator of the universe. The vibrations of conch shells, drums, and flutes mingled with the soft clapping of hands, creating a symphony that seemed to awaken the very walls of Krishna's palace. In this atmosphere of harmony, King Yudhishthira, the wise and just ruler of the Pandavas, was also preparing for his day. He stood in his chambers, surrounded by the gentle sounds of devotion, drifting from Krishna's quarters, his eyes closed. He joined his hands together and recited his secret mantra, seeking blessings for himself and his kingdom. As he finished his prayers, Yudhishthira turned to Satyakaya, a noble warrior of great strength and loyalty, and asked him to check on Bhishma, the mighty warrior lying bedridden in the sacred field of Kuru, a descendant of Sinai. Krishna's words echoed through Satyakaya's mind as he hastened to Yudhishthira's chambers. Upon arriving, Satyakaya found the king seated, surrounded by his brothers Arjuna and Bhima, and his twin cousins Nakula and Sahadeva. The finest chariot of Vasudeva stands ready. Satyakaya announced, for Janardana will soon depart to visit Ganga's son. Yudhishthira's eyes sparkled with a deep understanding as he nodded in agreement. We must go alone today, the king declared. Without our soldiers, Bhishma should not be disturbed by unnecessary presence. Let the guards remain behind. Dhananjaya, Arjuna listened intently and hastened to prepare their chariot for departure. Yes, they set out towards Krishna's palace. The 5 Pandavas, Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, rode in silence, their minds focused on the moment ahead. The air was filled with an anticipation that seemed to reverberate through every molecule. Meanwhile, Krishna himself emerged from his chambers, accompanied by Satyakaya, grandson of Sinai. He mounted his magnificent chariot, its wheels adorned with precious gems, and its rattled, echoing like thunder. As they met on the road, the two friends exchanged warm greetings, their eyes shining with love.
The sun had set on the great warrior Bhishma's life, and as he lay on his bed of arrows, surrounded by the sons of Pandu, a gathering of wise men and kings arrived at the Seine. Among them was Narada, a sage with godlike features, who reflected for a moment before speaking to the assembled company. The time has come, Narada said, for you to question Bhishma on the matters of morality and religion, for Ganga's son is about to cast off his life breaths. Like the saying, son, you must solicit him to discourse with you, that he may clear the doubts in your minds. The princes approached Bhishma, but their faces fell as they realized they were unable to ask him anything. Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, turned to Krishna and said, there is no one else who can question the grandsire but you, O slayer of Madhu. You are the foremost among us all, and you are conversant with every duty and practice. Krishna, the illustrious Vasudeva, approached Bhishma and spoke to him in a gentle voice. Hast thou, best of kings, passed the night happily? Has the understanding become unclouded? Does the knowledge shine in thee by inward light? Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he replied, through your grace, O Kesava, burying stupefaction, fatigue, exhaustion, illness, and pain have all left me. In a single day I behold all that is past, present, and future with clarity, just like a fruit placed in my hands. Krishna smiled, his eyes shining with approval. I have granted you celestial understanding, O Bhishma, so that your fame may be enhanced on earth. As long as a man's fame lasts, so long are his achievements said to live. The unslain remnant of the kings are sitting around you, eager to listen to your discourses on morality and duty. Bhishma's face lit up with understanding. I have been granted the boon of celestial understanding, he said. I behold all the duties declared in the Vedas, all those lay down in the Vedantas. I am conversant also with the duties and practices prevailing in particular countries and among particular tribes and families. As Krishna spoke again, his voice filled with warmth, you are old in years, O Bhishma, but your behavior is consistent with the ordinance of the Srutis. You are well versed in the sciences of morality and duty. No one has ever noticed a transgression in you from birth to birth. All the kings know you to be conversant with all the sciences of morality and duty. Bhishma's eyes shone with gratitude as he replied, I will speak on these subjects, O Janardana. I will discourse on high.
In the vast expanse of the Kurukshetra, a solemn gathering had begun. Bhishma,
The illustrious son of Gainhep and a great warrior stood tall, his eyes shining with an inner light. He was about to embark on a discourse that would illuminate the path of duty and morality. For the assembled kings, as he began to speak, the air was filled with anticipation. His words were like a gentle breeze that soothed the souls of all who listened. "I shall speak of duty," Ishma said, his voice resonating with conviction. "My speech and mine have become steady through the grace of Govinda, since thou art the eternal soul of every being." He paused, then turned to Yudhishthira, the just king, and addressed him directly. "Let the righteous soul, Yudhishthira, question me about morality and duty." Bhishma said, "I shall then be much gratified, and speak of all duties." His words were a gentle invitation, an open door to the realm of wisdom that lay within his heart. He spoke with reverence for Yudhishthira, acknowledging the king's virtues, his intelligence, self-restraint, brahmacharya, forgiveness, righteousness, mental vigor, and energy. He continued, Bhishma described Yudhishthira as a paragon of virtue, one who honored his relatives and guests, servants, and others depended on him. He praised the king's truthfulness, charity, penances, heroism, peacefulness, cleverness, and fearlessness. "Let the righteous-souled son of Pandu, who would never commit a sin influenced by desire of pleasure or profit or from fear," Bhishma said, his voice filled with admiration, "put questions to me." But then a shadow fell across the gathering. Vasudeva, Krishna's incarnation, spoke in a tone that was both gentle and sorrowful. "King Yudhishthira, the just overcome with great shame and fearful of the curse," he said, addressing Bhishma directly, "does not venture to approach thee." Vasudeva's words were like a whispered secret, revealing the depths of Yudhishthira's remorse. Bhishma listened attentively to Vasudeva's words. He knew that his own actions had set in motion a chain of events that had led to this moment. As the duty of the Brahmins consists of the practice of charity, study, and penances, he said, his voice steady once more, so the duty of Kshatriyas is to cast away their bodies, O Krishna. In battle, he spoke with conviction, outlining the duties that lay before a Kshatriya: to slay those who disregarded the eternal barriers of virtue, and to make the earth a lake of blood in battles.
The sun was setting over the gathering of wise men and warriors, casting a warm orange glow over the scene. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, stood before Bhishma, his grandfather and revered teacher, with great respect. Yudhishthira bowed to thrice of the Lord Krishna and saluted Bhishma, seeking his permission to begin. "Grandsire Yudhishthira," said his voice, filled with reverence, "I have always been fascinated by the duties of kings. They are said to be the highest sense of duty, the very foundation of morality and righteousness. I wish to learn from you about these duties, for they hold the key to a king's success and happiness." Bhishma smiled, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. Yudhishthira, he began, "a sense of kingly duties is indeed a sacred trust. A king must first cultivate humility and wait upon the gods and Brahmanas with reverence. By worshipping them, he pays off his debt to duty and morality, earning the respect of his subjects." Yudhishthira listened intently as Bhishma continued, "Exertion is essential for a king's success. Without it, mere destiny cannot accomplish the objectives cherished by kings. Destiny is like the reins on a steed or the hoof on an elephant. They guide and control, but exertion is what brings results." Bhishma paused, surveying the gathering before him. "Truth is the foundation of kingly duties. A king who is devoted to truth finds happiness in this life and the next. Rishis also value truth above all else, for it is their greatest wealth. Similarly, a king's possession of every accomplishment and good behavior inspires confidence in his people." Please, Bhishma spoke. Yudhishthira's eyes shone with understanding. He asked questions, seeking clarification on the intricacies of kingly duties. Bhishma replied, patiently sharing his vast knowledge. "A king must be mindful of his weaknesses and those of his foes." Bhishma said, "He should keep his own counsel and observe conduct that is straightforward. If he becomes too mild, his subjects will disregard him. If he becomes too fierce, they will be troubled." Bhishma's words hung in the air like a gentle breeze on a summer day. Yudhishthira listened attentively, absorbing every detail of kingly duties. "The Brahmanas are the foremost of beings on earth," Bhishma said, his voice filled with reverence. "They should never be punished by a king. Instead, They should be protected and respected. The king who is wise will always show compassion towards the four orders of his subjects, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, as the sun dipped below the. In the midst of a grand assembly, Bhishma stood tall, his eyes fixed intently on King Yudhishthira, a king. He began, his voice like a gentle breeze on a summer day, should always be ready for action. Never faltering in his duty to protect and serve his people, he paused, surveying the faces of those gathered before him. Usanus, the revered sage, has penned a sloka that speaks directly to this truth. Bhishma continued, listen carefully, O king, as I recite it. Like a snake swallowing up the earth, swallows up two creatures, the king who is averse to battle, and the Brahmana, who is excessively attached to wives and children. His words hung in the air like a challenge. Bhishma's gaze locked onto Yudhishthira's face. You must remember this, O Teja among kings. He urged, make peace with those who would do you harm, and wage war against those who threaten your kingdom. Do not hesitate to slay even those closest to you, if they act inimically towards your people. Please, Bhishma spoke his words with a tapestry of ancient wisdom, drawing on the teachings of revered sages and kings. He recalled the tale of King Maruta, who had sung a sloka that echoed Vryaspati's own sentiments. The king should administer justice like amass wealth like Kavra, and be observant of the merits and effects of his own acquisitions and laws. As Bhishma's narrative flowed on, painting vivid portraits of kings who had lived by these principles, he spoke of King Sagara, who had exiled his own son Asamanjas for his cruel ways, of Risha Adaleka, who had cast off his favorite son Switikitu for his deceitful nature. He himself, Bhishma said, non-violence and compassion are the eternal duties of kings. They should always seek to benefit their people, never coveting what belongs to others. A king must be skilled in arms, yet also practice liberality and self-control. As he spoke, Bhishma's words seemed to take on a life of their own, conjuring images of a just ruler who governed with wisdom and compassion. Such a king, he said, would never fall away from prosperity. His people would live in fearlessness, like sons in the house of their sire. The assembly listened, and Prince Vidishwa's tell. They saw before them a vision of a kingdom where righteousness reigned supreme, where subjects lived in peace and harmony with one another. And when Bhishma finally fell silent, his words hung in the air like a benediction, leaving all who heard him to ponder the timeless wisdom he had shared. In the midst of a gathering of esteemed sages and Brahmanas, Bhishma stood tall, his words dripping with wisdom, protection of the subject to Yudhishthira. He began as the very essence of kingly duties. His eyes sparkled as he continued, the divine Vryaspati does not applaud any other duty so much as this one. As Bhishma spoke his words with a tapestry of ancient wisdom, he mentioned the revered sages who had composed treatises on the duties of kings. The thousand-eyed Indra, Manu, the divine Bharadwaja, and Gaurasiras, all of whom praised the duty of protection above all else. Yudhishthira, his eyes like lotus leaves and his hue like copper, listened intently as Bhishma outlined the means by which protection could be secured, to employ spies and servants, giving them their just dues without haughtiness. Bhishma instructed realized acts with considerateness, never taking anything capriciously or without cause. He emphasized the importance of selecting honest men for administrative functions, as well as heroism, skill, and cleverness in transacting business. Truth, Yudhishthira was told, was essential, along with seeking the good of the people. Bhishma's words painted a vivid picture of a king who must be ever vigilant, always mindful of his subjects' needs. He spoke of producing discord among enemies by fair or unfair means, repairing old buildings, and inflicting corporal punishments and fines regulated by observance of the occasion. A king, he said, should never abandon the honest, granting employment and protection to persons of respectable birth. As Bhishma concluded his discourse on the duties of kings, Vasampayana continued the tale, the illustrious Vasa, Devasthana, Aswavasudeva, Kripa, Satyaki, and Sanjaya. He said, filled with joy and faces resembling full-blown flowers, exclaimed, excellent, excellent, and hymned the praises of that Teja among men. Bhishma Yudhishthira, however, stood apart, his heart heavy with sorrow. He gently touched Bhishma's feet and said, O grandsire, I shall tomorrow inquire after those points about which I have my doubts. With a cheerless heart and eyes bathed in tears, he bid farewell to the gathering. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Yudhishthira, along with Kesava, Kripa, and others, saluted the Brahmanas, and circumambulated the son of the great river. They cheerfully ascended their cars and bathed in the current of the Drishadwai, performing auspicious acts and offering oblations to their ancestors before entering the city called after the sun had barely risen over the vast expanse of the Kuru field, casting a golden glow over the Seine. The Pandavas and Yadavas, having completed their morning rites, emerged from their tents. Their faces set with determination, they climbed onto their chariots, which resembled miniature cities adorned with intricate carvings and gleaming armors. They approached the spot where Bhishma lay. His piercing gaze met theirs. The great warrior's eyes sparkled with a deep wisdom, as if he held secrets of the ages within him. Yudhishthira, the just and mighty king, stepped forward, his hands clasped in reverence. "O Bhishma," he said, his voice filled with awe, "we have come to pay our respects. How did you pass?" The knight Bhishma smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I slept peacefully, my princes," he replied. "But I sense that you have not come merely to inquire after my well-being. You seek knowledge, wisdom, and guidance." Yudhishthira bowed his head in respect. "Indeed, O Bhishma," he said, "we seek your counsel on a matter that has long puzzled us. Why do kings rule over the world? What is it about them that inspires such reverence?" And Bhishma's eyes grew serious, and he began to speak in a low, measured tone. "In the Crete age," he said, "there was no sovereignty, no king, and no chastisement. Men lived in harmony with one another, protecting each other with righteousness. But as time passed, error crept into their hearts, and their perceptions became clouded. Covetousness arose, followed by lust and anger." The great warrior's words painted a vivid picture of the decline of humanity as men succumbed to these passions. He continued, "Virtue began to dwindle, the Vedas disappeared, and with them righteousness was lost. The gods themselves were afflicted with fear, and they begged the divine grandsire for protection." Bhishma paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. "The self-born Lord composed a treatise of 100,000 chapters outlining the triple aggregate of virtue, profit, and pleasure. He also treated of emancipation with its opposite attributes and meanings. The grandsire's work covered the subjects of behavior towards counselors, spies, envoys, conciliation, fomenting discord, gifts, and chastisement." As Bhishma spoke, his words wove a tapestry of wisdom, revealing the intricate web of relationships between kings, gods, and men. The treatise described the 4 kinds of time for making journeys, the 3 kinds of victory, and the attributes of the aggregate of 5. He said it also dealt with chastisements of 2 kinds. The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around. Bhishma, the venerable warrior and sage, gazed at Yudhishthira, his eyes shining with wisdom. As he began to speak, "O mighty armed one," Bhishma said, "listen now to me, for I shall impart upon you the secrets of the 4 modes of life. These paths are not for the faint of heart, but for those who seek to transcend the mundane and attain union with the eternal soul." Bhishma's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming the minds of all present. He spoke of Vanaprastha, where one would renounce worldly attachments and live in the woods, surrounded by nature's beauty. The mode of Bhaishya was for those who had mastered the Brahmacharya path, living without desires or attachments, subsisting on whatever charity came their way. The Garhastha mode, Bhishma explained, was one of great merit and difficulty to achieve. It required a Brahmana to study the Vedas, beget children, enjoy life's pleasures, and yet remain detached from worldly desires. A true Garhastha dweller would be satisfied with his own wedded wife, observe the ordinances of the scriptures, and never show favor or disfavor to any way. As Bhishma spoke, Yudhishthira listened intently, his eyes wide with wonder. The great sage continued, "The illustrious rishis have said that support of sons and wives and study of the Vedas form the duties of those who lead this high mode of life." He paused, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Listen to me as I repeat the verse sung by Narayana himself." Bhishma said, "By truth, simplicity, worship of guests, acquisition of morality and profit, and enjoyment of one's own wedded wives, one should enjoy diverse kinds of happiness, both here and hereafter." As the words echoed through the assembly, a sense of awe settled over all present. The great rishis had indeed spoken the truth, that by following these paths one could attain to an absorption with the eternal soul, knowing no decay. The Brahmacharya mode was the most austere of them all. Bhishma explained, a Brahmana who adopted this path would live a life of rigid vows and self-discipline, attending to his preceptors' instructions and paying homage to the deities. He would never engage in worldly activities, nor show favor or disfavor to anyone. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a soft twilight. Blau Bhishma concluded his discourse. The assembly remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of the great sage's words. Then, as if by unspoken consent, they rose from their seats and began to disperse. In the midst of their journey through the forest, Yudhishthira, he eldest of the Pandava brothers, turned to Bhishma, the revered elder statesman, and asked for guidance on the duties that would bring them happiness and prosperity in the future. Tell us. Bhishma, Yudhishthira said, his eyes filled with a deep longing for wisdom. What are those actions we must take as members of our order to ensure a life filled with joy and virtue? Bhishma's eyes seemed to cloud over, lost in thought as he pondered the complexities of the question. After a moment of silence, he began to speak, his voice like a gentle breeze on a summer day. For the Brahmin, Bhishma explained, there are 4 modes of life: studying the Vedas, practicing penance, teaching others, and living off alms. These paths have been laid down for them alone. He paused, surveying the landscape before him as if searching for the right words. But what about us, O king? Yudhishthira pressed on his curiosity. Bhishma's gaze returned to him, and he continued, many acts that lead to heaven have been revealed to Kshatriyas like yourselves. However, these are not the answers you seek. The duties of a king are different from those of a Brahmin, or a Vaisya, or a Sudra. His voice took on a cautionary tone as he added, a Brahmin who imitates the ways of a warrior or a merchant or a laborer incurs shame in this world and suffers in the next. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind racing with questions. Bhishma's words seemed to hold a deep truth, but what did it mean for them? What about those who follow their desires? Yudhishthira asked, his voice barely above all whisper. Bhishma's expression turned somber as he replied, desires can lead us astray, O king, but the one who regulates his breath practices contemplation and meditation and remains steadfast in his duties is like a mountain unshakable. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the forest. Bhishma's words took on a sense of urgency. Remember, O king, he said, his voice filled with conviction, our actions are shaped by our nature, and our nature is shaped by our acts. The world is governed by time itself, which sets all things in motion and determines their course. With a gentle nod, Bhishma concluded, therefore regard the study of the Vedas as equal to the exertion of kingly power or the pursuits of agriculture, trade, and hunting. As Yudhishthira absorbed these wise words, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him.
In a serene and tranquil setting, Bhishma sat in deep contemplation, his eyes gazing into the vast expanse of time. He began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, as he shared the sacred duties of the 4 Varnas: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. Intelligent Brahmin, Bhishma said, should lead a domestic life, performing the 6 Vedic acts with devotion. He should avoid the service of kings, wealth obtained through agriculture or trade, and all forms of deceitful behavior. The retirement of a Brahmin into the woods after discharging his duties is indeed applauded. As Bhishma spoke, the air seemed to grow thick with expectation. His words painted vivid pictures in the minds of those listening. The Brahmin's life a tapestry woven from threads of devotion and duty. A Brahmin who falls away from his duties and becomes wicked, Bhishma continued, becomes equal to a Sudra. He who is a Sudra woman or engages in improper acts, such as dancing or serving as a village servant, loses his status as a Brahmin. The listeners hung on every word, their faces reflecting the gravity of Bhishma's teachings. They knew that the consequences of straying from one's duties were dire. The loss of status, the abandonment by the gods. Bhishma paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. Self-restraint and purity are essential for a Brahmin. These virtues have been laid down as the foundation of his duty. For him who is self-restrained has drunk the Sama in sacrifices and possesses compassion and patience. But man is truly a Brahmin. As Bhishma spoke, the atmosphere shifted, becoming more contemplative, more introspective. His listeners knew that they were being offered a glimpse into the very fabric of their existence. But what about those who seek to acquire virtue? Someone asked. Do not even the Sudras and Vaishyas play a role in this pursuit? Bhishma nodded, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. Indeed, men from all 4 Varnas can assist one another in acquiring virtue. If the members of these orders do not adopt peaceful duties, Vishnu's grace is withheld. The listeners leaned forward, their ears drinking in Bhishma's words, like parched travelers at an oasis. And what of the Kshatriya? Someone asked. What are his duties? Bhishma's voice grew more vibrant, as if the very essence of the Kshatriya's role was being revealed to him. He knew a Kshatriya must protect his subjects' rule with righteousness and perform great sacrifices. He should worship the Pitras and the gods with devotion and study. The Vedas, as Bhishma finished speaking, a sense of awe settled over the listeners. They knew that they,
In a grand assembly, Bhishma, the revered elder and advisor to king, Yudhishthira began to expound upon the intricacies of kingly duties, the duties of all four modes of life. He declared are encompassed within the realm of Kshatriya duties. The king's son listened intently as Bhishma continued. If the functions of royalty are disrupted, chaos ensues and evil spreads far and wide. Bhishma then recounted a tale from ancient times, when the powerful Mandakari had just and wise king sought to behold the divine Narayana. Mandakari had performed a grand sacrifice, offering his devotion to Vishnu, and was rewarded with a vision of the Supreme Lord in the form of Indra. Indra stood before him. Mandakari asked, "What is it that I seek by beholding the Ancient One? I wish to earn spiritual merit, to lead a life of righteousness, and to discharge the noble duties of a Kshatriya." Indra replied, "You are indeed a virtuous person, devoted to righteousness with senses under control and heroism in your heart. Your desire to see Narayana is pure, and I shall grant you whatever boon you may ask for." Mandakari humbly bowed his head, acknowledging the divine Lord's benevolence. "I do not wish for material wealth or power," he said, "but tell me, O Indra, how can a king discharge the duties that flow from Narayana?" Indra smiled and began to explain. Kingly duties are the most noble of all, flowing directly from the Supreme Deity. They are the foundation upon which all other duties rest. Indra continued, "Vishnu in his infinite power has subdued the Asuras and protected the gods and rishis. If he had not done so, Brahmins, Kshatriya duties and the very fabric of existence would have been destroyed. It is through the exercise of Kshatriya duties that these eternal principles are revived." As Bhishma finished his tale, King Yudhishthira listened with reverence, understanding the significance of kingly duties in maintaining balance and harmony within society. He realized that a king's role was not merely to rule, but to protect, to guide, and to uphold justice. The assembly fell silent as Bhishma concluded, "Kshatriya duties are the foremost of all, embracing the protection of every creature. They lead to eternal emancipation, and those who practice them shall be revered by all." The king nodded in appreciation, acknowledging the wisdom imparted to him by his venerable teacher. In a grand assembly of kings, Indra, the mighty god, stood before Mandakari, a wise ruler, to impart ancient wisdom on the sacred duties of Kshatriyas. With a deep voice and a stern gaze, Indra began to speak his words, carrying the weight of eternity. "King, you are blessed with a high-souled nature, capable of seeking the good of the world." Indra said, "Your duty as a Kshatriya is not only to reclaim the land for cultivation and fertilize it, but also to perform great sacrifices to cleanse yourself. You must protect your subjects, abandon begging, and uphold the virtue of abandonment, which is the greatest of all virtues." Mandakari listened intently, his eyes shining with curiosity as Indra continued to expound on the duties of Kshatriyas. "You have seen how other rulers, having acquired great learning from their preceptors, cast off their bodies in battle, engaged in fighting one another." Indra said, "Their bravery and selflessness are a testament to the noble nature of Kshatriya duties." As Mandakari nodded his head in understanding, Indra turned to address the diverse tribes that lived under Arya rule: Yavanas, Karatas, Gandharvas, Chinas, Savaras, Barbaras, Sakis, Tasharas, Kankas, Pathavas, and Frasmadrakas, Pondras, Poindas, Ramathas, and Camolius. These tribes should serve their mothers and fathers, preceptors and seniors. Indra said, "They must also serve their kings, follow the duties and rites inculcated in the Vedas, perform sacrifices to honor their pitras, dig wells for universal service, give water to thirsty travelers, and make seasonable presents to Brahmanas." Mandakari's eyes widened with concern as Indra spoke of the dangers that befell society when kingly duties were neglected. When kings fail in their duties, the land becomes afflicted and all creatures suffer. Indra said, "In such times men deviate from the right path
and the sins of chastisement is forgottenness. The assembly listened in rapt attention. Indra revealed a deeper truth, that even the gods did not disregard a virtuous king who ruled with justice and compassion. The divine Lord of all creatures had intended for Kshatriyas to watch over man, guiding them towards their duties and inclinations. As the wise words of Indra came to an end, Bhishma, a venerable sage, rose from his seat to conclude the discourse. The great Narayana in the form of Indra has departed, leaving us with the wisdom of ancient times. Bhishma said, "Let us adhere to the circle of duties that was first set a-going and follow the path shown." The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sat in contemplation with his revered teacher Bhishma. The young king's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he asked Bhishma to elaborate on the four modes of human life. Bhishma, with a gentle smile, began to weave a tale of virtue and duty. O Yudhishthira, all the righteous deeds practiced in this world are known to you as they are known to me. He said, his voice filled with authority, "Listen now as I reveal to you the merits that attach to kings who follow these four modes of life." A king's eyes widened as Bhishma spoke of the Vaishya mode of life, a life of selfless service, where one worships those deserving of worship and gives them their due, that king who rescues his kinsmen from distress. Bhishma continued, attains to the object of the Vanaprastha mode of life. The young king's mind was racing with the possibilities. Bhishma went on to describe the Garhastha mode of life, a life of domestic duty, where one honors those who are righteous and deserving of worship, a king who protects all creatures, mobile and immobile. Bhishma said, and honors them as they deserve, attains to the object of the Garhastha mode of life. As the conversation unfolded, Yudhishthira's understanding deepened. He saw the king who rules with wisdom, compassion, and justice, one who protects his subjects and honors those who are righteous, attains to the highest merits, that man who regards all creatures as like his own self. Bhishma said, who never does harm and has his wrath under control, obtains great happiness, both here and hereafter. The young king's eyes shone with a newfound understanding of his duties. He realized that by protecting the righteous, honoring those who deserve it, and upholding justice, he could earn the merits of all four modes of life. Bhishma's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and uplifting as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yudhishthira rose from his seat, his heart filled with determination. He knew that he had a sacred duty to protect his people, to uphold justice, and to honor those who deserved it. With Bhishma's guidance, he felt the sense of purpose wash over him, a purpose that would guide him through the trials and tribulations of kingship. The wise old teacher smiled as Yudhishthira departed, knowing that the young king had taken the first step on his journey towards greatness. Do thou adhere to kingly duties that are eternal, Bhishma said, his voice fading into in the midst of a tumultuous era. Yudhishthira sought the counsel of his grandsire, Bhishma, on the duties of a kingdom. "Tell me, O grandsire," he asked, "what are the principal duties of a kingdom?" Bhishma's eyes gleamed with wisdom as he began to speak. "The election and coronation of a king is the first duty of a kingdom, but kingdom without a ruler is like a ship without a rudder. It drifts aimlessly, vulnerable to every wave of anarchy that arises." He paused, his voice taking on a tone of reverence. "In crowning a king, it is Indra himself who is crowned in the person of the monarchs. The people should worship their king as they would worship the mighty god Indra." As Bhishma spoke, Yudhishthira listened intently, sensing the gravity of his words. "A kingdom torn by anarchy is a place where righteousness cannot dwell." Bhishma continued, "The inhabitants devour one another like stronger fish preying on the weaker in the waters. Anarchy is the worst possible state, and it is the duty of kings to protect their people from such chaos. But who should be crowned as king?" Bhishma's words turned to Manu, a wise and powerful leader who had once been approached by the inhabitants of the earth to become their ruler. Manu was hesitant at first. Bhishma explained, fearing that governing a kingdom would be a difficult task, especially among men who were always false and deceitful in their behavior. The inhabitants of the earth, however, reassured Manu that they would support him with all their might. They offered to give him a share of their wealth, their most beautiful maidens as wives, and even a portion of the merit earned by their subjects under his protection. "With our strength enhanced in this way," they said, "you will be invincible like Kavra,
protecting the ichas and wretches as moved by their words, Manu accepted the challenge and set out to establish order on earth with a large force at his side. He made his rounds checking every act of wickedness, and setting all men to their respective duties. The inhabitants of the earth were inspired with fear and respect. For their new ruler, and Manu's might was likened to that of Indra. Himself as Bhishma finished speaking, Yudhishthira nodded thoughtfully. He knew that his own kingdom faced similar challenges, and he realized that the duties of a king were not merely ceremonial, but a sacred responsibility to protect and serve his people. Those who desire prosperity, Bhishma concluded, should first elect and crown a king for the protection of all, like disciples humbling themselves before their preceptors or gods in the presence of Indra. All men should humble themselves before. In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, posed the profound question to Bhishma, the venerable patriarch. Why, he asked, do the Brahmanas declare that the king is a god? Bhishma, with his eyes twinkling like stars, began to weave a tale of ancient wisdom. He spoke of Vaisamanas, a king from Kosala, who was renowned for his intelligence and compassion. One day Vaisamanas sought out Brihaspati, the great sage, to understand the secrets of governance. Vaisamanas approached Brihaspati with humility and reverence, circumambulating him before asking his question. O wise one, he said, by what means do creatures grow and flourish? What is the key to eternal happiness? Brihaspati, with a gentle smile, began to expound on the importance of the king's role in society. The duties of all men, he said, are rooted in the king. It is through fear of the king that men refrain from devouring one another like beasts. The king brings peace and order to the land by upholding wholesome restraints and checking the forces of lust. As Brihaspati spoke, his words painted a vivid picture of a world without a king's protection. If the king did not exercise his duty, he said, the strong would prey upon the weak, and the very idea of property would disappear. Men would disregard their mothers and fathers, their preceptors and guests, if they were not protected by the king. Brihaspati continued to paint a dark picture of a world without royal protection. All restrictions about marriage and intercourse would cease. Agriculture and trade would fall into chaos. Morality would sink and be lost, and the three Vedas would disappear. Sacrifices would no longer be performed. Marriages would not take place, and society itself would cease to exist. But Brihaspati also spoke of the blessings that flowed from a king who exercised his duty of protection with the king's protection. He said, men can sleep fearlessly without shutting their doors or bars. Women may wander freely unattended by male relatives. Men become righteous and serve one another without harming each other. As Brihaspati finished speaking, Bhishma looked at Yudhishthira with a deep gaze. The king, he said, is not just a man, but a high divinity in human form. He assumes 5 different forms of Nyaditya, Mriti, Vaisravana, and Yuma. When he punishes the wicked, he becomes Agni. When he observes justice, he becomes Aditya. When he destroys evil men, he becomes Mriti. When he rewards the righteous, he becomes Yama. The wise Yudhishthira, king of the Pandavas, sat in contemplation, seeking guidance on how to rule his kingdom with wisdom and justice. He turned to Bhishma, the venerable patriarch of the Bharata dynasty, for counsel. Tell me, O Bhishma. Yudhishthira asked, what are the special duties that a king must discharge? How shall he protect his kingdom and subdue his foes? How shall he employ his spies to gather intelligence on those who would do him harm? Bhishma's eyes twinkled with wisdom as he began to speak. A king must first conquer himself, O Yudhishthira. He said, for how can one conquer others if they cannot even conquer their own desires and passions? The conquest of the 5 senses is a great victory, for it allows a king to resist the temptations that would lead him astray. Bhishma continued, his words flowing like a river. A king must place strong bodies of soldiers in his forts, frontiers, towns, parks, and pleasure gardens, as well as in all places where he himself goes. He should also employ spies who are skilled in disguise, men who can blend in with the crowds and gather information without being detected. These spies, Bhishma explained, should be chosen for their wisdom, their ability to endure hardship, and their loyalty to the king. They must be able to move undetected like ghosts or spirits, gathering intelligence on all who would seek to harm the kingdom. A king's own court is also a place where spies may lurk. Bhishma cautioned he must know who his enemies are and how they operate. He should set spies in shops and markets among beggars, and in pleasure gardens, as well as in meetings of scholars, and in public places. By doing so, he can uncover the hidden dangers that threaten his kingdom. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the wisdom of Bhishma's words. He knew that a king must be ever vigilant, always prepared to defend his people against those who would seek to harm them. When a king finds himself weak, Bhishma said, he should make peace with a stronger foe, if it will bring him advantage. A wise king knows when to fight and when to retreat, for the safety of his kingdom is paramount. King must also be just in his administration of justice. Bhishma continued, he should appoint wise men to hear disputes and settle them fairly, for the state rests upon a proper administration of law. He should also set honest men over his mines, salt grain, ferries, and elephant corpse, that they may be managed with integrity and wisdom. Yudhishthira nodded, taking in every word. He knew that being a king was not just a matter of power and prestige. In the midst of a kingdom's turmoil, King Yudhishthira sought guidance on how to rule wisely. He approached Bhishma, the venerable sage who had mastered every aspect of human behavior, and asked for his counsel. Revered one, Yudhishthira said, "Tell me, can a king achieve true happiness and success by adopting virtuous conduct?" His words were laced with a deep longing to do what was right, and just Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he began to outline the path to righteousness. A king should observe 36 virtues, he said, his voice filled with authority. These qualities are interconnected and will bring great merit to one who cultivates them. As Bhishma spoke, his words were a tapestry of wisdom guiding Yudhishthira toward a noble way of ruling. The king listened intently, his mind drinking in the sage's teachings. A virtuous person should never abandon kindness. Bhishma continued, he should have faith and acquire wealth without causing harm to others. He should pursue pleasure without attachment and speak words that bring joy, not strife. Bhishma enumerated each virtue with precision, painting a picture of a king who would rule with compassion, wisdom, and integrity. He should be brave without boasting, the sage said, and liberal in his giving, but never to those who are reckless or ungrateful. Yudhishthira's eyes shone with understanding as Bhishma spoke of the importance of forming alliances wisely, avoiding wickedness, and treating friends with loyalty. The king listened as if each word was a precious gemstone, imbuing his soul with its meaning. As the sage concluded his teachings, Yudhishthira felt the sense of clarity wash over him. He knew that he had been given a rare gift, the guidance of one who had lived and learned from the depths of human experience. With reverence, Yudhishthira bowed to Bhishma, acknowledging the wisdom that had been imparted to him. From that moment on, the young king vowed to rule his kingdom according to the principles outlined by the venerable sage. As he began his reign, a sense of hope and renewal filled the air, for it was clear that Yudhishthira would strive to be a just and compassionate ruler, beloved by his people and blessed by the gods. Bhishma, who had witnessed this sacred moment, smiled in approval as he reflected on the wisdom imparted to Yudhishthira. The young king's docility and intelligence had made him receptive to Bhishma's teachings, and now with a newfound sense of purpose he would strive to create a kingdom that was a beacon of peace and prosperity. In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the wise king, sought the counsel of Bhishma, the venerable sage, with a deep sense of longing to avoid grief and adhere to righteousness. He asked, "O revered grandfather, how should I as a king protect my subjects, so that I may not incur sorrow and yet fulfill my duty?" Bhishma's eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began to speak. "My dear Yudhishthira, I shall outline the eternal duties of a king in brief, for if I were to elaborate on them fully, I fear I would never exhaust their depths." He paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing to worship. "Those Brahmanas who are devoted to their duties, learned regular in worshipping the gods, and observant of high vows. This is the first step. When they come to your court, employ them in officiating at your sacrifices, and with your priest by your side, rise up to greet them, touch their feet, and worship them as befits their station. By showering gifts upon these worthy Brahmanas, you shall invoke their blessings for the success of your endeavors." As Bhishma spoke, his words were a tapestry of wisdom that seemed to unfold before Yudhishthira's very eyes, endued with sincerity, wisdom, and intelligence. "O Bharata, thou shouldst adopt truth and avoid lust and wrath. Heed my warning, for the foolish king who pursues profit without taming his passions shall ultimately sacrifice both virtue and wealth." Bhishma's voice took on a cautionary tone as he warned against employing those who were covetous and foolish in matters of pleasure and profit, stained with lust and wrath. They will oppress your people with contrivances that bring only misery. But you, O king, should always surround yourself with those who are free from covetousness and possessed of intelligence. See, as the sage's words flowed on Yudhishthira,
listened intently his heart, drinking in the wisdom, like a parched traveler at an oasis. Bhishma continued to guide him through the intricacies of governance, advising him on how to fill his treasury with a sixth part of the yield of the land, as tribute, fines, and forfeitures levied upon offenders, and imposts upon merchants and traders. With each passing moment, Yudhishthira felt himself being drawn into a realm of understanding where the path to righteousness was illuminated. Bhishma's words painted the vivid picture of a king who ruled with compassion, liberality, and vigilance. His people, deeply devoted to him, never desire to fill your treasury by acting unrighteously or from covetousness. He cautioned that king who does not act in accordance with the scriptures fails to earn wealth and religious merit. As the sun began to
In the midst of a grand assembly, Bhishma, the venerable sage, began to recount an ancient tale that would shed light on the intricate relationship between the four Varnas, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaisya, and Sudra. He spoke of Kauravas, the son of Aila, who sought wisdom from Mahabharat. The god of winds Kauravas inquired about the origin of the four orders, and why the Brahmin stood at the forefront. Mahabharat explained that the Brahmin was born from the mouth of Brahma, while the Kshatriya emerged from his two arms, the Vaisya from his two thighs, and the Sudra from his feet. The Brahmin's duty was to preserve the Vedas and other sacred scriptures, while the Kshatriya was created for ruling the earth, wielding justice, and protecting all living beings. Kauravas then asked Mahabharat who rightfully owned the earth, the Brahmin or the Kshatriya. The god of winds replied that everything in the universe belonged to the Brahmin due to his birthright and precedence. However, there was an exception in times of distress. When a king sought to earn merit and secure a place in heaven, he should grant all conquered lands to a learned and virtuous Brahmin. Bhishma continued his tale by saying that a wise king, aware of the intricate balance between spiritual and temporal power, should appoint a priest who was well versed in the Vedas and other scriptures. This harmonious relationship between the king and his priest would bring prosperity to both the subjects and the deities. The assembly then heard another ancient story about Aila's son and Kasyapa. Aila asked Kasyapa, when the Brahmin forsakes the Kshatriya, or vice versa, who should be regarded superior? To whom do the other orders relay and maintain themselves? Kasyapa replied that when the Brahmin and Kshatriya are at odds, ruin befalls the kingdom. Kasyapa continued to explain that robbers infest a kingdom where confusion reigns, and good men consider its ruler to be a Mleccha. The oxen do not thrive, children do not study the Vedas, and no sacrifices are performed in such a place. When Brahmanas abandon Kshatriyas, their children become impure in blood and assume the nature of robbers. However, when the Brahmin and Kshatriya stand together, each protecting the other, both attain great prosperity. Their friendship is like that between two trees. When one protects the other, they grow strong together. But if this bond breaks, chaos ensues and destruction overtakes all. Kasyapa warned that if a sinful wretch slays a woman or a Brahmin without facing punishment, danger threatens the Kshatriya ruler. In the assembly of wise men, Bhishma, a revered sage and warrior, began to speak about the delicate balance between the king and his priest. He said that just as a kingdom's prosperity depends on its ruler, the ruler's success relies on the guidance of his spiritual advisor. In a kingdom where the invisible fears of its subjects are soothed by the Brahmana's wisdom and the visible threats are vanquished by the king's bravery, true happiness reigns. To illustrate this point, Bhishma told an ancient tale about King Muchukunda, who had conquered the entire earth with his martial prowess, seeking to test his strength. Further, the king traveled to Aleka, the realm of Vaisravana, the lord of treasures. However, instead of submitting to Vaisravana's power, Muchukunda was met with a challenge. The lord created an army of Rakshasas to attack the king as Muchukunda's forces were being slaughtered. He began to rebuke his wise priest Vasishta for not having protected them. But Vasishta, determined to prove himself, undertook severe penances and with his spiritual powers defeated the Rakshasas. When Vaisravana appeared before Muchukunda, he was taken aback by the king's fearlessness in upholding Kshatriya duties. Vaisravana spoke to Muchukunda, "Many mighty kings more powerful than you have come before me with their priests and offered worship. If you possess the strength of arms, why do you rely on Brahmanic might? Why do you act so proudly?" Enraged by these words, Muchukunda replied, "The self-born Brahman created both Brahmanas and Kshatriyas from a common origin. They are meant to complement each other,
not compete against one another. The power of penances and mantras belongs to the Brahmanas, while the might of arms is ours. We kings must protect our subjects with both kinds of strength. Vaisravana was impressed by Machakunda's words and said, I never bestow sovereignty without being ordered by the self-created Lord, nor do I take it away from anyone without a command. You may rule the entire earth free from bounds. But King Machukunda refused to accept this gift, saying, I do not desire to rule with your blessing. I wish to maintain my kingdom through the might of my own arms. Bhishma continued his tale, saying that when Vaisravana saw Machukunda's unwavering commitment to Kshatriya duties, he was filled with surprise. The virtuous king ruled the earth, obtained by his own strength, aided and yielding precedence to the Brahmana. Bhishma concluded thus, it is said that a kingdom prospers when its ruler, guided by his priest, upholds the balance between spiritual.
The sun was setting over Hastinapura, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, sat in contemplative silence, seeking guidance from his revered grandsire, Bhishma. The young king's eyes shone with a deep longing to understand the secrets of righteous rule and how to earn merit that would lead him to a life of felicity. Bhishma, sensing Yudhishthira's introspection, began to speak in measured tones. A king must be liberal in his giving, performing sacrifices, and observing vows and penances. He must protect his subjects with righteousness, honoring those who are virtuous by standing up for them and offering gifts. The king's conduct sets the tone for the entire kingdom. If he is righteous, so too will his people. Please, Bhishma spoke. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind soaking in the wisdom of his grandsire. He asked, tell me, O grandsire, how can a king succeed in aggrandizing his subjects and earning regions of felicity in the other world? Bhishma's eyes twinkled with ancient knowledge as he continued, the king earns a fourth part of the merit that his subjects acquire under his protection. By protecting them, he acquires a fourth part of their good deeds, such as stuti gifts, pouring libations, and worshipping the gods. As Yudhishthira pondered these words, Bhishma cautioned him against adopting an overly inoffensive approach to ruling. You are inclined towards mildness, compassion, and righteousness, but this will not suffice. Kings must be strong, courageous, and capable of smiting wrongdoers. Your heart is virtuous, but you must also possess the strength to protect your subjects. Yudhishthira's face contorted in anguish as he considered Bhishma's words. He confessed, I do not desire sovereignty for its own sake, but I wish to acquire merit through it. Bhishma smiled knowingly and said, you have been born to perform acts of protection, gifts, duties, sacrifices, and righteousness. These are the duties that will bring you prosperity in this life and felicity in the next. As the conversation drew to a close, Yudhishthira asked once more, what acts are conducive to heaven? What is the nature of the great felicity that arises from them? Bhishma's voice took on a tone of deep wisdom as he replied, he who brings relief to one afflicted with fear for even a moment is most worthy of heaven. Be cheerful in your rule, O Yudhishthira. Acquire heaven by protecting the good and slaying the wicked. Let your friends and all honest men derive their support from you, just as preachers seek refuge under the deity of the clouds. And that,
in the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the king, turned to Bhishma, his revered grandsire, and asked for guidance on the duties of Brahmanas. Amongst Brahmanas, he said, some are engaged in their proper duties, while others pursue different paths. What is the difference between these two classes? Bhishma's eyes sparkled as he began to explain. Those Brahmanas who possess learning and benevolent features and treat all creatures with equal respect are considered equal to Brahma himself. He said, his voice took on a tone of reverence as he continued, they who are well versed in the Vedas, the Yajusas, and the Samans, and dedicate themselves to their orders, practices, are, O king, equal to the gods. As Bhishma spoke, his gaze swept across the assembly as if drawing a mental map of the various castes. But there are those amongst them who are not well born, he said, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness, who do not adhere to their orders' duties, and who have succumbed to evil practices. His eyes clouded for a moment as he added, these Brahmanas are like Sudras. They lack the refinement and nobility that defines our order. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind grappling with the complexities of Bhishma's words. He knew that a king's duty was not only to protect his people, but also to uphold the social hierarchy. Grandsire, he asked, how shall I distinguish between these Brahmanas? Which one should I consider equal to Brahma? Bhishma's expression turned wise as he replied, a virtuous king such as yourself should recognize those who are not possessed of Vedic lore and have no fires to worship. These individuals can be impressed into public service without compensation. The conversation unfolded. Bhishma painted a vivid picture of various Brahmanas, each with their own role in society. There were those who offered